Studio One ready? We're going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now on Rough Diamond Radio, the next instalment of the series, The Thoughts of Chairman Greg. As normal, listeners' discretion is advised due to bad language. Well, hello. Today's topic for discussion is death. Now, death, they say, comes to us all, and given no evidence to the contrary, I think they might be right. The catalyst for including an episode on death here was the funeral of a friend. He went out for his birthday bash, had a grand old time, went home, lay down, and died in his sleep at the age of 50. I was struck at the time by how quick and how final death is. 1 minute you were here, next you're gone. It's not like you've just popped down to the shop for a pint of milk, or gone to Benidorm for a fortnight. But how did Bugs Bunny put it?
And that's all, folks.
That sounds about right to me. Then at my mate's funeral, I was looking round as you do, and I saw a tall man of about 60 years of age, with greyish blonde shoulder-length hair and a large matching moustache. He stood head and shoulders above the people around him, and I couldn't help thinking he looked like an Anglo-Saxon warrior, or a character out of an Asterix the Gaul book. OK, there were no furs or cloaks pinned to the neck with a bronze brooch, but it was close enough for me. I could just imagine him standing on a windswept hillside, looking on as a fellow Anglo-Saxon was lowered into a grave. He then would place a sword or such next to the body, before filling the grave back in, and walking away. It also crossed my mind at the funeral, as we filed out past the coffin, that we were the modern Anglo-Saxons, doing the modern windswept hillside burial, no doubt having similar thoughts, showing similar reverence, and even observing the collectively accepted protocol for such situations as our forefathers had. I mean, when you think about it, mankind has been undertaking some sort of ceremony to mark when a person they know dies, in one form or other, since the Stone Age or even before. And I'm sure that people of all cultures, throughout time, have felt similar grief and sorrow at the loss of a loved one, but they do handle the formalities differently. Let's take a few examples. We all know about the Egyptians mummifying their kings and queens, wrapping them up in bandages like a failed St. John's ambulance proficiency test, then burying them under a very large misshapen traffic cone. But a lesser known burial tradition is the Korean death beads. People will take the ashes of their departed loved one and turn them into beads, which they put in a glass vase and display at home. Go figure. We in the Western world are familiar with the term R.I.P., rest in peace. Well, in Madagascar, that just ain't gonna happen. They have the thing called Dance of the Dead. Seriously, if a family in Madagascar are having a big party, they may well at some point nip down to the graveyard, pull out of their tomb a favourite aunt or brother, and carry them round for a bit, past the new house built for Uncle Joe, past the new shop second cousin Frank just opened, then back to the graveyard, tuck them back up in their tomb until the next party, when they come out again. What the fuck's that about? One a bit closer to home. During the Victorian times, there was a popular practice where if a family member died, they would call in a, guess, a doctor? Nope, too late. An undertaker? Maybe later. No, they would call in a photographer. Yes, a bloody photographer, to take photographs of the deceased. Sometimes they would even pose the deceased, as if they were reading or like, or even part of a family group. I mean, can you imagine it? Mr. and Mrs. Parry standing behind a chair, with all the little Parrys dutifully sitting neatly on the floor in front, and there in pride of place in said chair is Grandma Parry, stone dead these last 4 days. But when all's said and done, being dead can't be that hard, otherwise most of my mates that I grew up with couldn't have done it. Mind you, having said that, where I grew up, the coroners had to add a new classification that would be accepted on the death certificate that stipulates the cause of death. That classification they added was stupidity. While we're on the subject of stupidity, people meet their end through many causes, but two reasons that must be high on that list of causes are stupidity and bad luck. I mean, we've all heard of people who die when the vending machine they're fucking with to get a free can of Coke falls on them. Or people like the Chinese man who, to avoid the entrance fee of a wildlife park, climbed up and over the perimeter fence straight into the tiger enclosure. Grade 1 stupidity, no doubt. But the incident that emphasises death by bad luck for me is the demise in April 1886 of Mr. David Watkins, a 65-year-old man from Aberdare, South Wales. Mr. Watkins went out for a quick drink to his local pub, the White Lion Inn. He's done that many times before, but on this day he never made it home alive. Was he stabbed in a bar fight? Was he run over by a tram? Did he simply trip up and bang his head? Or choke on a pickled egg? No, he was trampled by a fucking elephant in the pub. Apparently the story is there was a travelling menagerie in town, and stabled at the back of the pub was one Madame Jumbo. Mr. Watkins went to take a look. Well, after all, you would, wouldn't you? You don't often see an elephant in a Welsh mining town. But some of the local young arseholes were taunting Madame Jumbo, who eventually got seriously pissed off and lost a rag. Mr. Watkins was too slow to get away, so Madame Jumbo did a tap dance on his head to vent the fury. That's what I call bad luck. A little side point to this. The White Lion Inn is in my hometown of Aberdare, and it was my granddad's watering hole. And I've just worked out that a time scale my granddad could have been one of the young arseholes goading the elephant. Go figure. This next example is more someone getting their just desserts than bad luck. A Serbian man took his dog for an evening walk. The dog was off the lead and without the muzzle. Apparently this is illegal in Serbia. On seeing this, the local policeman confronted the man, and an altercation ensued, during which the policeman drew his pistol. The Serbian man, not to be outdone, pulled a hand grenade out of his pocket and pulled the pin. The policeman made a swift exit. The Serbian man then threw the hand grenade after the fleeing policeman. Then the dog, taking his cue, ran after the hand grenade, picked it up in his mouth, took it back to the Serbian gentleman, and he went off, killing both the dog and the bloke. But I digress. It's a really sobering thought when you think about death and what's to come after death, if indeed there is anything. If there's nothing after death, then that's it, game over. No, think about it for a while. Nothing, no feeling, no consciousness, no chance of coming back, nothing, zilch. I don't know about you, but that frightens me shitless. Never again to have a pint of cold cider in the sunshine, no more laughing till you cry, never having sex again. But the worst thing about this is the lucky bastards who are still alive can. What's that saying? When a friend of mine succeeds, a little part of me dies. No doubt such terrible thoughts are responsible for man's need to believe in some form of afterlife. People naturally want to believe there must be something else, must be more, because the alternative seems unacceptable. I mean, all their thoughts, all their emotions, all their dreams, the love they feel, can't just end, can it? And this need to believe in the afterlife, this brings up a very interesting question. People talk about the afterlife, but if you are going to the afterlife when you die, the question is, what's going? You know you can't take your body or your favourite bass guitar with you, so what goes? And everyone comes up with the same answer, your soul. And this is where I start to worry. A person's soul always seems to be inevitably linked to religion. We'll deal with that in another chapter. And if you then take religion out of the afterlife, you end up with spiritualism and ghosts. First, let's deal with spiritualism. As best as I can work out, spiritualists teach the spirit world exists all around and through the material world that human beings inhabit, but in a different dimension or on a different plane. Also, spiritualists believe that everyone goes to the spirit world, but that those who have done wrong go to less pleasant parts of that world because they will gravitate to spend time with other spirit beings who behave badly. Reminds me of that line in AC/DC's Highway to Hell. My friends are going to be there too. Also, spirit beings can work to improve themselves and thus move to a more pleasant level of the spirit world. It just seems like another way of saying be a good person or else, and jam tomorrow. I think it's just another way that humanity comes to terms with the unfairness of life. I mean, say you know a complete bastard who cheats, lies and bullies his way through life, lives the life of Riley at other people's expense and misery. It's good work if you can get it, mind. Then when they die peacefully in their sleep, cuddled up to a large buxom wench, well, large buxom wench will be my choice, but you imagine your own preference if it helps, without having received the justice in this world you perceive they deserve. It's nice, reassuring thought that the bastard got it to come in the afterlife, innit? The other side of the coin is, if you have a shitty life, struggling through trauma after trauma, dying happy and alone in a damp hovel, but you've been a good boy or girl in your earthly life. So the thought as your life fades away, that you get your turn of the good times in the afterlife, must be of some reassurance, surely. For my part, I think it's all bollocks. Not the soul bit. The label's an impedimenta that comes with spiritualism. And that brings us to ghosts. The definition of a ghost is a ghost, sometimes known as a spectre, phantom, apparition or spook, is the soul or spirit, now here we go, of a dead person or animal that can appear in visible form or other manifestations to the living. Hang on, before you dismiss this out of hand, think on. Where is the need for ghosts within humanity, other than to frighten the shit out of children? There's no carrot and stick approach used to explain them, and I can't see a link to religion. So why? And reports of ghost sightings are numerous and varied. And the type of story I find difficult to dismiss is the type where the person recounting such sighting or meeting is unaware of it until the other information comes to light. I'll give you an example. This is a story of a doctor working in an old London hospital. I'll read the story in the first person so you get the feel of it. I also think some sound effects will enhance the telling. I was new to the hospital and still trying to find my way around. Then one evening, as I passed the old mortuary building, the clock struck midnight and my emergency bleep went off. It was yet another cardiac arrest bleep. I ran through the paths, down the wards, and past an old block that was the children's ward. Then through a window I saw several children playing. While I was still running, I thought, that's strange for children to be up at this time of night. Anyway, I arrived at the cardiac arrest scene to find the patient happy, drinking tea and watching TV, and was told, "Sorry doctor, a student nurse pressed the wrong button. False alarm." I was given a cup of coffee and a biscuit by means of compensation. Then while I sipped my coffee, I said, "Those children were up late in that old ward down there." The nurses looked at each other, looked at me, looked back at each other, and then said, "That ward's been closed for years, doctor. There are no children down there." Apparently I wasn't the only person to have reported seeing children playing in that ward. Rumour has it they were children who died in a fire years ago. A not dissimilar sighting was reported by a nurse working in another London hospital. She says, "I was walking along the top floor corridor and seeing a ward sister coming towards me, I said, 'Evening, sister.' Then I realised I can only see her from the knees up." The ward sister carried on, then disappeared. Apparently the corridor had its floor raised years before, and I was seeing the ghost walking on the old floor level. And there are numerous other similar sightings. Now I can accept that people may be telling fibs or simply mistaken, but all of them? But this last story I'm going to recount I know is true, because it happened to me. When I was growing up, the family home was an old miner's cottage in South Wales. And when I was about 14, I woke up one night, looked towards the doorway, and it was an old man with a dye cap on and the waistcoat and hobnail boots, just standing there looking at me. So I hid. I peeked out under the bedclothes a couple of times and he was still there. Then when I last looked, he'd gone. I got up and rushed to my mother's room and said, "Who's the man?" My mother and father asked what I was talking about, so I told them about the man in the doorway. And my mother went as white as a sheet. Apparently she'd seen the same man a couple of weeks before, and only told my father and not the children in case we got scared. So how the fuck do you explain that? So from my point, I really think there's something to this ghost lark. Maybe it's just my need to believe in something after death, but I doubt that. My bet is it's simply some phenomena we don't understand yet. Like showing a person from a technically backward society a mirror or a TV. They know what they're seeing, but the explanation is simply beyond their comprehension. To conclude this topic, death is the only, and I mean the only thing we can be assured of in our earthly existence. You were born and you're guaranteed nothing other than death. There is no guarantee of food, sex, love, respect, wine, or even taxes. Just death. Cheering thought, eh? Then again, I'm 60 years old and I've had plenty of food, plenty of wine, plenty of love, plenty of respect, and even plenty of sodding taxes. And I must take time to say I'm also had my fair share of sex, which if there is a God, cheers for that, pal. So on the balance of life, all I was guaranteed in life was death, and I've had all this other stuff. Not forgetting the small stuff like watching the sunset, a red kite soaring in the sky, walking through fresh snow, watching my wonderful wife get undressed to get into bed every night, watching Wales beat England in the Six Nations, going to a Stranglers gig. The list is endless. And I've told the kids, if there is such a thing as an afterlife, I'll let them know. There won't be any door rattlings. I'm going to walk in one night, tap them on the shoulder and say, "Guess who's back?"